Okay, Nelly, welcome to this interview. For me, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Today, I would like to ask you some questions regarding language and culture. But before getting straight to the questions, I would like you to do a brief introduction. Tell us a bit about yourself and your experience in the teaching field.
Hey, Oscar. Good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Nelis Maria Bejarano Chantac, and I'm a teacher for passion. So I studied English degree at Universidad de Córdoba in Monteria. I also hold a master degree in teaching English as a foreign language in Unini Puerto Rico University. My experience as a teacher has been great. I think that teaching is than uh, more than a job. It can be part of your life. So it is like a gift or something you like to do, and I really enjoy teaching. So I think it's really essential when a person loves what she or he does, because that is part of the success that we have. Sometimes we are called, or we hear that teachers are not well paid, or teachers are not well recognized, or teachers are not that good um, uh, perspective, or they don't go farther in the profession. But I think that if we keep working hard, if we start changing leads with our teaching, with our instruction, with our training, uh, no one, but more than one or two, or maybe three, or maybe we don't know, we are not aware of how many generations are we gonna influence with our leads and also with our teaching. Um, it is also nice when you encounter people or students who have good references when they talk among themselves, and they say, well, I know that teacher, this person, I think she is okay or she is good because this, and they start giving the reasons um, why they remember the teachers. I think that a good teacher, it can be remembered for life and can change, of course, the life of a person forever.
Okay, that's great. So thank you for the insight and your comments about your experience. And now getting into these questions, as I was telling you earlier, we will be discussing the relationship between language and culture. And that's actually the first question that I would like to ask you. What do you think is the relationship between language and culture?
Well, these two terms are really key words in language teaching. Not culture and language are intertwined. They go they go hand with hand because they are always part of the insights or the inputs we need to teach our lessons. Um, According to some others I have read or they have stated, for example, Huntrace says that culture is the belief and practices govern, governing the life of a society for which a particular language is the vehicle of expression. Therefore, everyone's views are dependent of the culture which has influenced them, as well as being described using the language which has been shaped by that culture. Uh, they are these two terms are strongly linked. So some others also express that it is part of the skills we also teach, because we need to know we need to have some knowledge of the culture of the target language we are teaching. For example, when a person moves to another place, this person adopts the idiomatic expressions, adopts the way the people behave, how people greet, how people the food habits, the dressing way, maybe food or religions as well. So culture can change the life of a person. Okay. Another person, another author states that the learning without culture is incredible. A particular language is a mirror of a particular culture. Okay, so they are always. We cannot work. Um, we cannot say no. I'm going to teach about, or we are going to talk about culture and language is aside, or I'm going to teach this language, but I'm not going to mention anything about the culture because while we are teaching, we use a vocabulary, we use examples, or we mention or we show places that behind those places, behind those names, there is a history which is part of the culture of different uh, nations or cities or hometowns.
All right, thank you for your insight. And moving on to the next question, what is the influence of culture in the process of a foreign language process?
The influence. I think that language influences a lot. So culture influences the language a lot because as I was mentioning, if we are going to teach about the term a specific culture, we need to start with the um, basic information of that place, um, the first inhabitants of those towns, um, and little by little the people are getting to know the history of that place. We are teaching the language, but while teaching the language, we are getting information. We are uh, getting to know how people behave, how people are, how people um, are, or how people do their jobs, or how do they celebrate, for example. Okay.
Yeah.
The understanding of a culture and its people can be enhanced by the knowledge of their language. There is another who states that even though people are brought up under similar behavioral backgrounds or cultural situations, but however speak different languages, their worldview may be very different. Different thoughts are brought about by the use of different forms of the language. Language is rooted in culture, and culture is reflected and passed on by language from one generation to another. So it is totally influenced, the culture is totally influenced in the way we teach, um, because with the language, we give that insight, that information, and um, this information go from one generation to another. So as the culture is part of the life of people, language always um, needs those information, those pieces of information from culture in order to teach the language, or in order um to put into practice the language. Because if we are gonna talk, or maybe in the first levels the beginner levels, we maybe focus on principal tenets of the language. But when we are teaching more higher levels like B1, A2 or B1 or B2, we need to get extracts from the culture and put some examples. And sometimes it is done inherently or unconsciously because we we are learning the language and we start thinking what are the why do those people act in that way, or why do they uh, work, or how do they act as they do. Is because that culture is really influencing in the way we are learning a foreign language, in this case English, which is more of the uh, best or the more used languages around the world.
Yeah. All right. So you know that in the teaching process, sometimes we come up with cultural expressions. So the next question is, which cultural expressions do you know countries have through language?
There are different um, part of cultural expressions that is inherent with each person. For example, here in Colombia, we know we are a multicultural country, and we have different regions. We have different um, accents, dressing ways, um, and people overseas also have their way to express, to have those cultural expressions. For example, they express through sports. In the United States, for example, you know that one of the sports that predominate the most is the American football, also baseball, basketball as well. They have more, so those are the sports which more fans. And maybe if we are teaching sports in one way, uh, we start relating or telling the stories or of those athletes because we are relating to the language, and we are giving some examples of sports. For example, we are also one another kind or another way of expressing this culture is maybe art. Art is one of the way that people express their culture a lot, because a simple picture can express a lot. So we can express, I don't know, paintings. We can start um, talking about the author of that painting. What does that person wanted to express by painting that picture? Um, so they print those cultural um, ideas in by art. Also, the cloth is also uh, a form of expressive form, expressing way of the culture. You know that in Europe, people wear different kind of uh, clothes, and we sometimes say no. I don't like to wear, or I wouldn't wear that piece of clothes. But for them, it's really useful. It's really fashionable, and for us, it can not be that fashionable. But we need to respect and to take into consideration that that is part of the culture. Okay.
Yeah. So keeping with the questions, why do you think it is important to have an oral tradition in a country?
Okay. Um, an oral tradition says everything about a town or a city or a country because when a person starts, so because we know about the history of a person or a history of a place because of the inhabitants of that place uh, did something or wrote something or painted something, and now we say no, this house or this park is named under, well, is named under this name because it has a history, okay, behind that a name. There is a history, and there is something special that maybe we don't know. So it is really essential that we keep with those names, or that we respect what other people, even when we were not born, our ancestors, our grandparents, or our great grandparents, they knew or they did something in the past, and now this is also part of our present, even though it started 100 years ago. It's really essential to respect and to keep going, or to keep and to tell and retell the history to the people around us, so that the history or the culture of that place um, can be or can endure forever. So, for example, different places here in Colombia, I don't know, maybe one of the towns here, Cañas Gordas, it is named that way because of something. Because if we start searching what happened before, or why do the people call that place in that way, it is important that we keep with the tradition and with that name, and we don't change uh, that that name or those patterns that were given at the beginning, because in this way I think that it is going to endure, that is going to be longer, until death or until the end, I don't know.
Yeah, right. Thank you. So, do you think we teach language using culture, or we teach culture using language?
Well, I think we usually do both, okay? Because if we teach, for example, greetings, we give some contents to students for them to get acquainted with them and how people greet in each country. Okay? In China, for example, people bow, right? Or in Japan as well. In Germany, the most common greeting is the handshakes, and they also keep the eye contact. That is the way how they express, okay, how they behave, how they act in different circumstances, in different situations. Men usually greets women first, and they wait for women to respond to that greeting. Uh, so we uh, provide students with some vocabulary, with some structures, with some examples, with some patterns, and we are teaching the language, but they are also getting some information that maybe they didn't know about that language. So we we are teaching the language and teaching culture, and we are also teaching the culture because maybe we can give some examples, or make some gestures, and this way students mm, understand better how language works in those places, which is parts of the culture. Okay.
Yeah, so lastly, do you take into account culture in the strategies you use in your English classes? Can you give me some examples?
Okay. Yes, I do. I take some strategies that I take into account it. I know that culture strategies is part of my class because I cannot separate or I can't not divide um, culture because some others say or they express that it it is also one of the skills of the language. Even you know that we have speaking, reading, listening, writing, and according to some others, they also say that culture is part of the skills that need to be integrated in order for students to know, in order for a student to know more about the language, because they um, start, for example, saying, okay, what celebrations do we know? Uh, um, what celebrates? We are going to talk, for example, about past habits or past activities. We start telling some stories about Mahatma Gandhi or other um, people who lived extraordinary lives and who did um, different heroic things. They did heroic things. So we need to start telling them some history. We come up with culture for them to know. Okay, one of the examples I could mention for us to use in teaching English, maybe the teaching of celebrations. For example, Mother's Day. Well, celebration entails or may cover big samples, um, celebrations such as Father's Day, Mother's Day, newborns, wedding parties, birthday parties, New Year's Eve. So with each those, we can um, teach part of the culture, and we also compare. So how do people celebrate, for example, New Year's Eve in China, and how do we celebrate New Year's Eve in Colombia? We are doing also um, a part of we are sharing information, and they are comparing, and they are noticing that they are um, getting to know more, uh, getting to know more, and they are going to be also more interested in in learning, because they notice that what they are learning, what students are learning, they can be put it into practice, or when they go overseas, they are they have a previous knowledge about what they are going to expect when they go, or that when they visit to another country, when they visit another country, another place, they will know, ah, no, I know that these people behave or greet in this way, or they celebrate these um, parties in this way because in my English class, I took it into account. So I think that it is important to take into account those parts of culture, to introduce and to make classes more significant for students, because they will be interested. Maybe you know that not all of the students, not all of the students like English, but some of them have um, they know culture, and they know to read a lot, and they need to search, or they are interested in getting information from history or some important insights of different parts of the world, and they say, ah, now they start getting interested in English because of the culture, or because of the information they got from the book or from the material the teacher gave them. I don't know if I also wanted to read a little bit about Hobbes. He says, personally, okay, he says, personally, one is convinced by Hobbs, 2012, lectures when she gave two successive lessons on that topic. She concluded with the answer, yes, there is a strong link between language and culture. Ignoring it might result in problems. Then she goes on to say it is impossible to avoid teaching culture because teaching language entails teaching culture. I want to mention another one, another uh, quote from Mahmoud says, consider culture as the fifth skill to master. Thus, teaching culture will become an integral part of L2 or foreign language instructions. We need to refer or integrate culture in language teaching because showing every single bit of a language may entail culture. So opportunities should be given to learners to share their own culture, especially in heterogeneous classes. Yeah, mm, culture should be part of our of one of the strategies we need to use in order for the students uh, um, to get involved or to get um, known about the language, but also getting to know more about the culture or um, about the culture and about the information about the places because they haven't maybe most teachers or most students do not have the opportunity to go overseas, but through the teaching, the learning of language, uh, we may know a lot from the culture just with learning the language. Okay.
All right. Yeah, Nelly, thank you. I really appreciate your insights on this important topic, which is the relationship between language and culture. So it was a pleasure for me to interview you, and thanks again for
Okay,
providing us with your insights on this topic.
okay, Oscar.
So
Pleasure.
thank you and see you next time.
Okay, see you. Bye bye.